The Baltimore Ravens' future of Brandon Stephens is in serious doubt after comments made from Eric DeCosta at the team's end-of-season press conference. We talk about that. John Harbaugh revealing a plan for the team, plus Derrick Henry sharing that he is all in on the Ravens. All that and more coming up here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day, free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes a video form on YouTube where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and also an audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're a 5-day-a-week Baltimore Ravens podcast, even in the offseason. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we got you covered every single weekday. Plus, we do bonus episodes. We do live shows. We have a lot coming your way over here on Locked On Ravens, as we always do. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Back here after the Ravens' end-of-season press conference with John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta. We went live yesterday right around 1 p.m. to talk about it, and so we'll reference some stuff we talked about in that live show, but I wanted to dive a little deeper into some of the comments from both Harbaugh and DeCosta. So we'll talk about Brandon Stephens, because I think the thing that really caught the whole Ravens sphere by storm, that's what everybody's talking about, is those comments about Brandon Stephens and how they didn't necessarily seem super promising for him coming back to Baltimore. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll dive into John Harbaugh and him revealing a plan and talking about his year and even his future a little bit. So we'll dive into that. And then we'll also talk about Derrick Henry. He shared an Instagram story that he's all in on Baltimore, and I definitely want to talk about what the future holds for Derrick, because I want him in his Baltimore uniform for as long of a time as we can get him here. So let's talk about it. Let's dive into it. Brandon Stephens, honestly, one of the most controversial Ravens this season on the field. I know there was plenty of drama talk off of the field, and we can get to some of those comments as well over the course of the show. We certainly talked about him yesterday, but we can be honest about it. I've been honest about it all year. It was a really tough year for Brandon Stephens, and it was disappointing considering what we had seen from him the year prior. And I think a lot of people expected him to be maybe even this cornerstone on the Ravens defense potentially with the year he had in 2023. But 2024 was just such a step down for him. He was the weak link of the defense when it was all said and done. And it seemed like every single week people were calling for him to be benched. The Ravens brought in Trey White, and they used him in certain packages. They were using Stephens inside safety. Like, they were trying to move him around a little bit, it seemed like, as well. But Brandon Stephens, the comments that Eric DeCosta made about him, as I mentioned, not super promising for his future. So DeCosta was asked about Stephens and the future for him, and DeCosta's full answer was, B. Steve is a great pro. He's an awesome attitude, great teammate. He'd probably say he didn't have as good of a year this year, but his attitude never wavered. He was out there, very, very dependable, good practice player, tough physical guy. He's a free agent. So there's a lot of pressure on him in his mind. He was a great draft pick, and I'm proud of him. This is a guy that's really only been playing DB for about 4 or 5 years. He's grown a lot. He's been a good player for us over the years. We'll have to see what happens with him. He's probably going to have a chance to test the market and see what his value is, but he's helped us win a lot of games over the last couple of years. He's been a big part of our success, and I'm proud of him for that. So people looked at DeCosta saying he's probably going to have a chance to test the market and see what his value is. And I think people took that comment and said, oh man, all right, he's going to go out there, test the market. The Ravens are saying, hey, go see your value. Sometimes what that means, just from a literal perspective, is, he's going to go out there and see. It's not just the thing he's going to re-sign with the Ravens, boom, and that's that, before free agency or during free agency, right? That's not what's going to happen here. Obviously, some for just NFL offseason reasons, another because I'm sure Brandon Stephens wants to test his market. This is his opportunity to get his first big or medium, whatever size is going to be, NFL contract. And there was a lot of praise there from Eric DeCosta. I'm not sitting here and telling you that DeCosta just bashed him in his answer. Nothing of the sort. But I do think that there is a real question with Brandon Stephens, and I'm sure that for a lot of people, there are doubts about whether he will come back to the Ravens, because I think that when you look at where the Ravens can upgrade, Brandon Stephens in that position is certainly a place where they could. Now, there's definitely a chance that Brandon comes back to Baltimore. I'm not saying that it is 100% certain that he's going to be gone and there's no shot that he's going to be in a Ravens uniform next season. I don't speak on absolutes here on this show when it comes to things happening or not happening. There's always a chance for the unlikely thing to happen, whether you feel like that's Brandon Stephens comes back or not. But he can't have the year that he had this past year. It was bad, and multiple times he did cost the Ravens either big plays or even games here and there with his inability to either turn his head around for the ball, which is the big thing for Brandon. And Eric DeCosta has a point. I do want to make it clear here. The Ravens kind of pulled Brandon Stephens around in a bunch of different positions over the first couple of years of his career, came into the league as a corner, and then they moved him to safety, and then they brought him back to corner, and they moved him to safety, and they finally decided, all right, corner's the position. He had a great year in 2023, and that's that. But he also was a converted running back, and so DeCosta's correct. He has only been playing defensive back for a couple of years, but we can't use that as an excuse to be like, oh, well, okay, let's the Ravens should bring him back and just let him work through. The Ravens don't have time for that, especially for a guy that is probably going to make a decent amount of money on the free agent market. I feel like his contract, while it will not be what it would have been if he was a free agent last year, I don't think this is like a veteran minimum type deal. Like, and obviously Brandon's not like a veteran, like 10-year guy, but like, I don't think it's going to be a minimum contract where, people are going to look at this past year and say, okay, there's no way we're throwing money at this guy. I think some team will. And I think it will probably be somewhat of an overpay, right? I think Brandon still has a lot of tools and a lot of potential, but I think the Ravens could stand to upgrade there. And so I think that could even be in the draft, where I think the vision coming into the year for the Ravens was that they would have this awesome cornerback trio of Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stephens, and Nate Wiggins. Arthur Millette obviously can play inside. You can put Kyle Hamilton there. You can switch Marlon in there if you want to. They had the depth like with TJ Tampa, etc. And it just didn't really work out that way. Millette obviously was injured for most of the season. Tampa didn't get a ton of playing time, and Stephens didn't perform up to expectation. Obviously, Marlon and Nate had incredible seasons, but if you've been listening to me every day here on Locked On Ravens, or you've caught a show or two before, you might have heard me say this because I say it all the time. The Ravens love their 3 cornerback rotations. They love having guys, especially on the outside, not just 2 of them, 3 quality guys. And you can go back to the Marlon Humphrey, Jimmy Smith, Brandon Carr days, or the Marlon Humphrey, Jimmy Smith, Marcus Peters days, if you want that. And they had Tavon Young, who they could throw inside. They like to have those options, those cornerback rotations. And I think that's what they were envisioning this year. It did not happen. So I think if Brandon's value comes back and it's not what maybe he expects it to be, or is not happy with that number, I could see him potentially signing a shorter prove-it deal. Geno Stone, for example, is I think a good example of this, where Geno had a great year, contract year. It's kind of the opposite of Brandon, because Brandon didn't have a good contract year, but he still had that year on tape in 2023. Geno signed a 2-year deal with Cincinnati. I think that deal was $14 million, if I'm not mistaken, something along those lines. And Geno's probably going to get cut this offseason, by the way. I would not be shocked if Cincinnati moves on after the year. Geno was really bad, unfortunately, for the Bengals in Cincinnati. And I feel like that's just a move that, not great. And Cincinnati probably will have to make that. But regardless, maybe Brandon does settle for a 2-year deal somewhere to say, hey, I know I'm a better guy than this. I'm going to work and do this and do that. And, maybe in 2 years he hits the market and he's worlds better than what we saw this year, because that we've seen it. That is in there for Brandon. But you cannot continuously have the same problem over and over again like Brandon Stephens does and expect to get rewarded. I mean, turning your head for the ball location is such a huge, huge factor. And as I said, the Ravens just quite frankly can't afford a player that's going to make those type of mistakes all over the field, seemingly in every single game. And a guy that is actively being targeted, right? And I was talking with someone who covers the Commanders, and Emmanuel Forbes was obviously their first round draft pick last season. And he's obviously cut. It didn't work out. It was a terrible pick. And he's in Los Angeles with the Rams, I think, right now. But he just didn't have any confidence whatsoever. And I'm not saying it's a confidence thing with Brandon, but just for an example, he came onto the field for his last game with the Commanders this season. I think it was against the Eagles. And immediately when Forbes came in, it was 3 passes in his direction, 3 catches, and just walked them down the field with that one guy. We saw moments with Brandon Stephens like that this season where it just felt like it was the Brandon Stephens touchdown possession. And it just felt like every play over and over and over and over again. On a contending team, you cannot have that. Guys are going to have bad games. Guys are going to have bad moments. I'm not trying to say everybody has to be perfect, and I'm not asking for perfection from Brandon Stephens or anybody. But you just can't have that as consistently as it happened. And so I wouldn't expect Brandon back personally. I know there are a lot of people who took DeCosta's comments and kind of said, okay, he's done. He's definitely not coming back. I'm not putting absolutes on it, but I know we'll read it one more time. He's probably going to have a chance to test the market and see what his value is. Very complimentary DeCosta was, but out of the guys who are iffy in terms of if they'll come back or not, Stephens to me is someone that I feel decently, not all the way, but decently confident that the Ravens will try to upgrade at that position. Coming up in the second part of the show, though, we'll talk about John Harbaugh's comments and get into some of Eric DeCosta's as well, because both of them revealed a plan for the Baltimore Ravens moving forward. Stay tuned. Lots to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Talkspace. Therapy is a game changer. It can manage stress, improve sleep, communicate more effectively, but finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into busy schedules can be a challenge. That's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace, leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours, and is convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health, and therapy has so many different benefits, from learning about yourself to also figuring out how to handle certain situations. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace. When you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code SPACE80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code SPACE80. We're back here on Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. Thursday edition of the show, still going strong in the offseason. It's been just a couple days of the offseason so far for the Ravens after their divisional round loss. I know everybody has all eyes on the Bills and the Chiefs, and maybe people don't have eyes on that. I don't know. Some people might not be strong enough to watch football yet. I'm slowly getting back to it. Obviously, it's painful to think about what happened with Baltimore, but we're moving ahead here on Locked On Ravens and figuring out what the next steps are for this team. And I think the end of season press conference from John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta did give us some of those insights. We talked about takeaways during our live show. So again, if you didn't check that out, we did an instant reaction show to that. So be sure to dive into all that content that was put out yesterday. But I want to get to some things here that we didn't talk about on the live shows. Well, we'll mix in some things we did. But my overall big one was that there really aren't going to be a ton of sweeping changes this offseason. And I didn't expect that. I mean, if you listen to me after the game or the day after the game on Sunday, I'd said, well, this is a offseason that's different from the past couple the Ravens have had. They don't have a long laundry list of top free agents that they have to re-sign. There are a couple of guys that obviously you have to look at. We just talked about one of them in Brandon Stephens, but guys like Ronnie Stanley, Patrick McCary, Patrick Ricard, there are a couple of players that you can make an argument for to come back. But it's not like last year where it was Nnamdi Madubuike and Patrick Queen and Geno Stone and Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van. It's not that. So this is your opportunity to essentially run it most of the way back and add upgrades at certain positions. Eric DeCosta made it clear that offensive line and safety are going to be 2 priorities for this team in terms of either continuing the rebuild on the offensive line like we saw, or obviously at the safety position, they'll be looking for, Marcus is not staying with the team, Marcus Williams. So he'll be moved on from. Eddie Jackson no longer with the team as well. John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta were both asked about Justin Tucker. I know some people wanted a kicker change. Tucker was nails after the bye, though, and he said both of them came to Tucker's defense, and there's always a chance for like competition to come in, but how much competition really is it with Justin Tucker in the building? So that's not something I'm necessarily anticipating, but the overall message was looking at extensions for guys. Obviously, the 2022 class is eligible, so guys like Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum, Isaiah Likely, and Charlie Kolar. You also have guys like Derrick Henry, who you could sign to an extension. And it's going to be a big offseason with that, because you don't want to go into a situation where all of a sudden you do have another laundry list of players and you have to make some decisions that maybe you don't want to, or find money in places where you didn't anticipate going. So I feel like we might see one or two decent extensions. And again, if it's a Hamilton, if it's a Linderbaum, well, we know that those guys are going to reset the market at their respective positions because they're that good at it. But we're going to see. I think that the big thing, though, is you can upgrade at O-line and safety. We talked about the cornerback position. I definitely think edge rusher is a priority for this team as well. So, John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta were very complimentary guys like Odafe Owe and Derrick Henry, Lamar, Ardarius Washington, like all over the place. And obviously for a guy like Ardarius, he's going to be a restricted free agent. And, that means he will be back. Eric DeCosta essentially confirmed that Ardarius will be back next season. He said, we're fortunate that we have him back again next year. So I'd assume the Ravens will give him a second-round tender. So for those who don't know how restricted free agency works, if a player is a restricted free agent like Ardarius Washington is this offseason, that means the Ravens can essentially assign a draft pick tender to them. So, it goes by round. I think it's first round, second round, late round tender are the three. And the first round tender is a certain amount of money. I don't know what the dollar value is this year, but the first round is a certain amount of money. Second round is a little less money. Late round is a little less money than that. And whatever tender gets assigned to a player, if a team signs that free agent, the team that signs them has to give whatever pick that tender is back to, in this case, the Ravens. So let's say the Bengals sign Ardarius Washington and the Ravens sign him to a second round tender. That means the Bengals would have to give a second round pick to the Ravens for Ardarius Washington. So usually teams assign, even if they assign later round tenders to guys, usually restricted free agents don't get signed. We don't see a ton of that happen. So I'd assume the Ravens maybe will give him a second round tender, because again, if the player's good and you assign too low of a pick to him, the team's like, yeah, sure, we'll go and we'll take that. We'll give up that pick for this guy. Like if the Ravens gave Ardarius a 6th round tender, then yeah, the team will go and give a 6th round pick for Ardarius. But if Ardarius signs that tender, second round tender, and whatever dollar amount that tender is, that's what Ardarius' contract would be for next year, and then he'd be an unrestricted free agent with obviously no boundaries after that. So little sidetracked with the lesson, but the point remains of you do have players in the secondary that you're going to be able to count on next season. It's just about filling in the cracks, and that really felt like the message from John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta about, not a ton of sweeping stuff coming in. They're not going to go and trade everybody and, make sure that, they have this guy out and this guy out and this guy out, bringing in fresh new faces. That is more of a next year thing if it happens, especially on the coaching staff where John Harbaugh is in the last year of his deal. He talked about that and, kind of brushed it off a little bit and kind of said like, I'm happy and this is, whatever happens, essentially was the message, paraphrasing there a little bit, obviously. He talked about Dean Pease and said that it's a little more of a nuanced thing with Dean. He came in, did a good job, and I think it's going to be a reduced role for Dean next year if he comes back. So he said that he's still going to be connected, but they're at the time of their life now where, Dean and his family have some different priorities. So we're going to see what that all looks like. Harbaugh didn't necessarily have a straight answer when it came to how the coaching staff will look, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, because things are so in flux right now. And even with Todd Monken, I know things are in flux with the head coaching search opportunity. My prediction would be Todd is back next season, but Jacksonville right now is an absolute mess. And I know that was one of the places Todd did have an interview. I know they might be favoring Robert Saleh right now after firing their GM like 2 weeks into the coaching search, which is ridiculous. But regardless, you just don't know. But it felt like, just from reading his answer, felt like he was confident that most of the coaches will be back next season. Obviously, it's not a guarantee, but I don't think we're going to have the like coach after coach after coach leaving like we saw last offseason, which was just absolutely brutal. It just felt like every day they were losing a coach. Now, we talked about Rashod Bateman, Kyle Van Noy, Odafe Owe. Eric DeCosta was very complimentary of those guys. And obviously, he said DeCosta was happy the team picked up the fifth-year option. That's another guy you got to decide on after next year. So this really feels like not the last shot. Like whenever you have Lamar, you're going to have a chance. That just is what it is. But it feels like this is the last chance for John Harbaugh. Obviously, they're not moving on from John this offseason. And, the whole lame duck thing, the Ravens don't love to have lame duck head coaches in terms of guys being last year of their deal without an extension in place. That usually doesn't happen with the Ravens. So we'll kind of see how it unfolds. But I think the Ravens are taking it like that this year, where if it doesn't work and there's another disappointing exit, I think John Harbaugh enters this season with his seat warm. And if there is that exit, I think we do see a change. So we'll see what happens, but we'll dive more into what John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta had to say in the final part of the show. Plus, Derrick Henry posted an Instagram story, and it made me think about kind of what his role could be next year, as well as the other running backs on the roster. So be sure to stay tuned. Lots to get to here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're back, our final segment here on Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. I didn't go anywhere. I'm still rocking out with you with Ravens content here today and each and every single weekday. Plus, we do some bonus episodes. We're not going to be doing bonus episodes every day on the weekend anymore during the off season. Obviously, when big stuff happens, we will, but there was a ton of content during the season we had to get to, and that's where the weekend bonus episodes came in. So whenever there is extra content, we'll dive into those bonus episodes. Whenever there's breaking news, we'll obviously go live for those as well. I'm going to miss the live post-game reaction shows. That's something that I love doing, and live shows are really fun to engage with everybody. So appreciate all the support. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form if you do want daily Ravens coverage. And tell a friend, tell a family member, we have them covered with the Ravens perspective on everything as well. Now, just to round out some of the comments that John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta made, because it did feel like even, they were asked, both Harbaugh and DeCosta, about Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, obviously the two players at the forefront of the divisional round loss for the Ravens, and, even freeing up some money with Lamar's contract. And I know that when that was asked, DeCosta kind of said, Lamar, haven't had discussions about that yet. He kind of giving him space right now. And obviously, DeCosta praised Lamar and all of that. But he said that, look, there's nobody that he'd rather have than Lamar Jackson. And again, strong support. Not that anybody was expecting anything different, right? But DeCosta acknowledged that, hey, look, a lot of teams have done that in terms of kicking the can down the road as far as, you can with these types of big, large contracts. And this is uncharted territory with the Ravens in terms of having a contract this big on the books. I mean, and Lamar earned every single penny of that. But he says he loves talking to him. We communicate all the time. As I said, I'm blessed to be with him for the last 7 years. Ronnie Stanley also was a conversation point, and obviously when it came to the offensive line, Roger Rosengarten plays both sides of the offensive line, so the message was kind of like they're not shutting the door on Ronnie whatsoever, but the focus kind of shifted over to Roger, and whatever side he decides to play on, or whatever side the team has to have him play on. I personally, and obviously DeCosta made it clear too, that they're expecting big things out of Roger Rosengarten next year. Trent Simpson was the topic of conversation too. Eric DeCosta called him an exciting young prospect. And the message from Harbaugh and DeCosta was, hey, he said, I'm not going to sit up here and say that it was not a successful season. It was in just about every way looking at it, but I'm disappointed. And he said, John is disappointed. We're all disappointed. Our team is disappointed. We had higher aspirations. We didn't achieve those aspirations. And, DeCosta's on to the offseason, which is one of his favorite moments and the favorite time of the year for him to kind of make his draft pick moves and sign guys and improve the team. So we'll kind of see, but seemed like the message again was they are not going to make tons of sweeping changes. It's just going to be kind of not status quo. I'm not going like that route, but I feel like they're going to be able to make upgrades and they're going to have an opportunity to kind of return most of the base of the roster and add a couple guys on that could elevate them to the next level, which might be what they need to get over that playoff hump. Now, Derrick Henry posted on Instagram because, Eric DeCosta, very complimentary of Derrick Henry, said that he's really happy that, Derrick chose the Ravens and went on this huge, awesome, positive rant about Derrick Henry during the press conference. And Derrick Henry, the Ravens put in a graphic. He put it on his Instagram story and he said, run it back. And I think that got a lot of people excited, not that people thought Derrick was going to leave or anything or get cut, but just the fact that Derrick is already bought and he's ready to get back to work. And it kind of got me thinking about, Derrick had 1,900 yards this season. It was the best year of his career. He was incredible with Lamar Jackson. That pairing worked out so well. And honestly, I'm thinking, hey, maybe next year he can rush for 2,000. That's how good it was. And I know a lot of people are going to say, what are you talking about? He's getting older, that old running back age, this, that, and the other. Derrick's different. Derrick's just different. And he and Lamar together make that offense so deadly and so dangerous. If Derrick didn't have Lamar and it was just some average quarterback, yeah, maybe there's more of a steep decline that happens. You worry a little bit about the age thing, but I'm not buying a ton of that. I'm not putting so much stock into that run as I go, Derrick's going to be terrible. But you also do have Justice Hill under contract, and I think that he just such a good player, so underrated, such a good player. And Keaton Mitchell, who I think will be better and honestly have a much bigger role. Sometimes with these tough, long-term, pretty brutal injuries, it just takes a guy a lot of time to get back into that mental and even physical space of being able to completely trust themselves again. And it can take time, right when a guy returns from that, sometimes they are 100% ready to go, but a lot of the time there is more time that's needed, even though you're healthy and you're cleared and everything's okay. So I expect Keaton to work hard this offseason, and I really expect next year to be the full unleashment of that three-headed running back mantra that so many people were waiting for last year. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. Coming up tomorrow, I'll be rounding out the week with more Ravens content, so be sure to stay tuned. So you're right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.